Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to hear what I have to say today. It's going to be fairly straightforward, which is my preferred way to do business. And afterwards, we'll have hopefully plenty of time to answer any questions that you might have. My name is Renard Turner, and I have a farm that goes by the name of Vanguard Ranch, located in Louisa County. I have a Gordonsville, Virginia mailing address, but I am in Louisa County. And myself and my wife, Chinette, own and operate the farm with the good help of my right-hand man, Mr. Richard Yates here, and his lovely wife, Sister Joyce, beside him. None of us are spring chickens, so we have to figure out ways to do things that use less labor-intensive methods. And I am here to share with you my enthusiasm for meat goats as one of the most attractive and viable alternative ventures for small family farms. Okay, so my talk today is going to be about is value-added, natural gourmet, and meat goat products. Our farm only does value-added, and we're going to get into that a little bit later, and I'll show you why. Hopefully I can make this thing work. Okay, the challenge for all of us, and this is not just a challenge for me, but this is a challenge for all small farmers who want to make it into the 21st century and beyond. We're all here because we're concerned with sustainable and organic agriculture, because we all have a passion and a conviction to know that if we don't do that, and if we don't move in that direction, that we're going to continue to hurt the Mother Earth that we all depend on. So there's lots of deep reasons for doing this the right way, a natural way, a slow way, a green way. That's the new catchphrase. It's now green, you know. Natural used to be enough, but now we're green and this, that, and the other. Okay. So the challenge is to create sustainable and profitable. Let me move over here so I don't block anybody out. Now I can see it. How's this? I think that's better for me. So we can, the challenge is to create sustainable and profitable enterprises to allow your farm to prosper in today's marketplace. Because let's face it, you can grow whatever you want on your farm, and you can be very successful at doing it. But if you can't market it, where does that leave you? We're going to get into that a little bit later on. As I said, I'm Renard Turner, president of Vanguard Ranch Ltd. Natural Gourmet Products, located in Gordonsville, Virginia. Why do I say natural gourmet products? Because we're going back to the marketing part, and how you invent yourself is very crucial, and how you're going to be able to move forward into the future with any kind of profitability. So I am a value-added producer. I produce products with an added value, not just raw materials. Our farm is based upon sustainable and all natural organic practices. If it's not sustainable, I won't even bother with it at all. I mean, there's no compromise here. If it's not sustainable, and that really means to me that if I was to walk away from my farm next month and come back 5 years later, everything that I put in place on that farm should still be there, because it should be able to sustain itself. Once you reach that balance, it should be able to sustain itself. Whether you're doing goats or pastured poultry or raising grapes or an apple orchard or nuts or whatever, if you set it up right, you should be able to walk away from it, and you should be able to come back, and it should still be there without your help. Because after all, that's how everything got here. Topics of discussion for today. Why value-added production? Well, the short version, which would you rather have? Here's a perfect example. One person grows the grapes on his farm. You can eat those grapes as table grapes. You can make grape juice, or you can make wine. Which product gives you the most return on your investment? The wine. That's the value-added example. Marketing. I love marketing. I mean, if you don't have a love of marketing, you're either going to have to develop a love of marketing, or you're going to relegate yourself to doing subsistence agricultural farming, because your farm will never progress to the level where you're going to really make a lot of money doing it, because the restriction is that you're going to have to trade a lot more work on a lot bigger farm and grow a lot more products unless you learn how to market your product at a value-added price point. And raising all natural meat goats, because that's 80% of my income comes from meat goats. The other 20% comes from other value-added products that are really an adjunct to having the meat goats and using their manure to raise organic herbs and vegetables. Okay. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'm going to go over these PowerPoints because they are very important. Why value-added production? And I'll tell you why. It's a lot less work for me to raise 100 does and market their offspring the way that I do than it is to raise 500 does and raise them and market their offspring the traditional livestock market route. Okay? Here's an example. I just passed around. There's this month's issue of the Goat Rancher magazine. You can feel free to pass that around amongst yourselves. I am Vanguard Ranch. We just do happen to have a feature article there, and there's very good information on it. But here's the example for value added. Right now, the slaughter market prices for meat goats in this country are at an all-time high. There's a number of reasons for that. It's an all-time high. That magazine says $2.32 a pound, which was the high price for a live goat. Now, most livestock producers would be very happy to get that kind of a money for the live animal. You take a 100-pound goat across the scale, you're going to get $232 plus some change at that $2.32 a pound price. Not bad money, you'd say. Okay, fine. And it isn't, as long as you've got no real money invested in getting that goat to the market. You have to be able to get it there at a profitable price point. Labor, fencing, feed, transportation, worming, minerals, hired help, price of land, diesel, insurance. Got to back all of those costs out to see if you're really able to make any money at that $2.32. Now, most goat ranchers nowadays, they're doing cartwheels for $2 a pound because they're used to selling them for $1.65 or $1.75 or whatever. Or they've been tricked into trying to make all of their marketing around certain, quote, ethnic, quote, unquote, holidays. That's not the smart way to do it. I mean, it's wonderful to say, okay, I'm going to make $3 a pound because I waited for, you know, the special Muslim holiday. What about the rest of the year? And how hard is it to synchronize all of your breeding on your farm to make sure that you have those youngsters that are born at the right time, at the ideal weight, to be purchased by that one customer base at that one particular point in time, when you've still got the rest of the year to survive? What we do is we create a unique identity for our product. We market our goat only as a ready-to-eat product. I do curried goat, which I have a sample heating up in the crock pot there, and after I finish, you're welcome to come and taste a sample of that product. We do quarter-pound goat burgers. I do goat kebabs, and I take a mobile unit out, a mobile kitchen on wheels, and I go to food festivals, state fairs, private catering, garlic and wine festivals, bar mitzvahs, private parties, you name it. We are able to do that. I have a license for that. We can come to your house, your girlfriend's house, your mama's house, and we can set up and we can have a party, and you can eat some of our fresh farm-raised all-natural product. Now, why do I do that? Because I'm able to market my product at a higher price point, retain that profit, and I'll share some numbers with you because you're not going to believe it. The first thing you want to do is you always want to tap into the niche markets. So where are these niche markets for goat eaters? And how many of you think that you really know where they are? You see, there's so much misinformation out there, you know. There was a time in this country where nobody ate turkey. You know that, right? The turkey was a forbidden bird. There was no turkey industry. There was no Thanksgiving, you know. And this may be a shock to some of you, but there was a time in history where there was no Thanksgiving. No Thanksgiving, no stuffing, none of that stuff. How did it happen? It was created by someone who did a very slick package of marketing on a whole nation of people to get them to display a certain behavior at a certain particular time. Very good if you're a turkey grower. But understand that there was a time when nobody did that. Same thing's happening in the goat industry. But now, here's the kicker. Meat goat is the most widely eaten meat on the planet Earth. Period. Every day on this planet, this great blue marble in the sky, more people eat goat than any other form of meat. Beef and chicken take a second seat to goat. Here's the problem with Americans. We like to think that we're very worldly, but we're not. Pretty much isolationists. We say there's America and there's the rest of the world. But flip the script. There's the rest of the world and then there's America. And there's more people in the rest of the world than there are in America, shocking as that may be. And they're not really waiting for us to lead them to do anything. We take ourselves too seriously in the world marketplace. And our politicians are partly to blame for that. And we're held hostage by those beliefs, you see. So here's what the conventional goat rancher says. The market for goat meat is an ethnic market. And if you're going to sell your goat, you have to learn to sell it to these people who come from a cultural tradition of eating goat. Well, that's not exactly true. I have found that anyone who is a meat eater, who has teeth, will eat goat if you present it to them. And while you're waiting for, this 2.5% of the population to show up to buy your product, you're missing out on the other 97.8% who would eat it. Okay, Whole Foods. How many of you know I've heard of Whole Foods? Just raise your hands. That's most everybody here. They are a national natural food store chain, and they have announced, actually last year now, because this is 2011, that they will start to carry goat meat in their stores. Now, why do you think Whole Foods is doing that? People want it. They also know that this country has a huge movement towards locally grown, sustainable, grass-fed, free-range meats because they've been proven to be healthier for you, right? They also want their price. They want their share of the market. But Whole Foods is the middleman. My model of marketing is, okay, do I really want to do business with Whole Foods? Well, I thought about it. I've actually had conversations with them, and, they may get a portion of what I do, but they'll never get 80% or 70%. They may get 5 or 10% because I don't really believe in the model that they have. And I'll tell you why. I make a stand as a sustainable and organic farmer. Catering to these national chains is not sustainable. It's not local. Now, they may be buying from a local farmer, but they're a national chain. So what they're going to do is they're going to outsource, and they're going to find somebody who'll grow this food for them. It may be in Mexico because they got a lot of cheap land, a lot of goats, and if they can raise them to their organic standards, then they can truck those goats from Mexico into America and sell them at their stores. That would cut the throat of all of us that are trying to raise goats on a local and sustainable marketplace. So we've got to be careful where we do our vending, because if they are applying a model that's not healthy for us, we're cutting our own throats in the process. You see, they will say, we want to support local and sustainable because we believe in it. But if they really did, and if you have a Whole Foods in Virginia, they shouldn't really be going outside of Virginia, North Carolina, maybe Maryland for their products, because they have to pay transportation costs, and there's a carbon footprint that's associated with that that is not healthy and sustainable. You can't have it both ways. You have to limit how far you're willing to go to market your food, to buy your food, and to sell your food. That's very, very important to do. I believe that the future of value-added production is in the development of non-traditional marketing venues. So it came to me. At one time I had 180 does on my farm, and that's the most I've had at one particular time. And I'm trying to balance the books and looking at how much I can realistically get from these does in a given year's production cycle, because I'm not in the business of carrying something for 3 to 4 years to get a return on my investment, which is why I don't grow fruit, nut trees. There's a place for them. I'm glad that people do. But for me to do it for a business, I don't have 5 years to wait to get my money back. So if you do, that's fine. It's an enviable position to be in. It just does not happen to be the position that I'm in. I can't wait 5 years to get paid. Doesn't work that way for me. Goats give you a quick, rapid return on your investment. You can sell them in the first year of their birth, and you can make your money back, which is why we should be doing it if you're in the meat goat business. Now, I decided the only way that I could really make the money that I wanted without killing myself, I had to figure out how to take 100 goats and get as much of a return on that investment as I would from 500. Now what that means is I have 1/5 of the labor, physically, 1/5 of the expense and feeding, 1/5 of the land use requirement, 1/5 of the fencing requirement, 1/5 of the mineral requirements, and everything else that is associated with that, as long as I could figure out how to do that. So mind you that when I started, and I served a little stint as National Secretary of the American KIKO Goat Association, and at that time, you know, we were happy to get $1.10 a pound for our goat slaughter market, okay? Well, when I can go out and market a goat burger at a quarter pound for $8 a burger, you do the math. That's $32 a pound. Now, how many of you would take $1 a pound or $2 a pound over $32 a pound? Raise your hand. No. Yeah, you would. No, you wouldn't. You would rather have $2 or $32? You'd rather have the $32. No, exactly. It's a no-brainer. So, but how do you do that? You have to go the extra mile and figure out how to create a market identity for your product and do all the prerequisite steps required in order to do that. Okay. So once I decided to do this, now mind you, there was no model out there before us that was doing this. So we decided, I said, I'm going to try this because I believe that people will buy this product at that price. And of course, people told me I was crazy. Oh, nobody's going to pay $8 for a goat burger or something. Not true. That's not true at all. I sold 400 in 4 or 5 hours before it. Sometimes they can sell more than that. It just depends. People will gladly pay that as long as you have a premium quality price that's well presented and you do your demographics and you know where to go to do business. It's entirely possible. Okay. I touched on this a little bit, but marketing our way. So marketing our way is we don't wait for the customer to come to us. We go to the customer. Where do we find our customers? Any place where there's 10,000 people and more is where I like to park my wagon. There is a brilliant gentleman by the name of Carter G. Woodson who wrote a book many years ago back in the 30s. And Carter G. Woodson says in his book, you go to town with your wagon full and your pockets empty. You come back with your wagon empty and your pockets full. That's the principle, people. You're waiting for 10 people to come to your farm to buy a live goat and pay you $1.50, $2 a pound. You might get 10 people that month. Wonderful. Instead, I take it to 20,000 people who are walking around hungry on a nice sunny day, and they're out having a picnic, and they're out drinking beer or wine, and they're out to have a good time, and their pockets are full of money, and there I just happen to be with a goat burger and a bun and a happy smiling face, and guess what? I have an interesting story, and guess what they do? They reach in their wallet, and they pay me for that service and that product, and they're happy to do that. In order to do that, your goats have to be processed, which is a soft word for slaughtered. So our goats are slaughtered and processed at a United States Department of Agriculture approved facility. You cannot retail sell your animals to the public unless you have them processed at a USDA approved facility. You cannot do it. It's against the law. You can have people come to your farm and buy an individual goat from you, and they can slaughter it and take it home and put it in their freezer and use it for their own personal consumption. You can do that. But again, you're selling one goat at a time. You might make $200, and you're not going to sell one every day. That's just the facts. If you could sell one every day, you do the math, you take 200 times 30, maybe that's not too bad. Maybe that's comfortable, and if that's what you want to do, then work that model. I don't care to. So what we do is we retain ownership of all of our product, and I'll tell you about this. It's a little bit, it goes into detail about this in the article in the Goat Rancher, but I'll break it down for you because it's important to understand this as a producer of any livestock animal. The live weight that you run that animal across the scale at is not what he's going to weigh after he's processed. You guys understand that, right? Okay. So what percentage of that live weight do you think that goat's going to bring you back as a product that you can retail?
70.
He's saying 70. Any other guesses? 50 is about where you're going to get. 50. Now, so here's how it breaks down. If I take a goat and I don't keep any of my goats on my farm past 6 to 7 months, 6 months being the target, So I'm only processing the young goats, okay? You got a 5-month gestation period. I got a 6-month grow-out period. That means I have an 11-month turnaround on the farm. If that goat is giving me a live weight of 60 pounds, but I take him in and get it processed, and if he processes out at 50% of 60 pounds, I got a 30-pound hanging carcass. 30 pounds, that's it, 30 pounds, hanging carcass, okay? I take that 30-pound carcass, I actually pay somebody to do this for me at the processing facility, and I have it totally deboned, cut up into 1-inch chunks for my kebabs, ground for my burgers, and all the little smaller pieces go into that curry that you're going to taste here later on today. So out of that 30-pound carcass, I'm looking at a target of 20 pounds, and it averages between 18 to 20 pounds per goat. Okay, so if anybody's really quick with math, but just look at it and you say, okay, but you're getting 18 pounds of product per each animal, right? But if you multiply that 18 pounds times 38, who's got a calculator real quick? Take your 18 times 38 and you'll see what the return on that product is based on a $38 per pound return on that product. Now, in order to get that money, you have to prepare it, invest in a vehicle of some type, or find a model to get that product out and serve it to people as a ready-to-eat product. And then you multiply that by 100 as many times as you care to deal with that level of production, and you can write your own check for where you want to go. You just have to have a model to work with. So, this is my mobile concession trailer, and we use it to attend festivals, state and county fairs, specialty food events, and we do mobile catering. We have catered 2 national meat goat conventions. I drove to Tennessee, and we catered for the International KIKO Goat Association a few years back. Myself, my wife, and my mom served dinner to 150 people. We did lunch for several hundred that came the next day for the sale of the pedigreed goats. By the way, nobody's ever asked me when they came up to my window whether that goat's parents had won any ribbons or what its genetic history was or if it was a champion or not. Never asked me. This happens to have been at Virginia State University, which is one of my favorite places. Virginia State University is a fine resource for those of us in this state. And I've done a couple of field days there, and we've been met with a great reception, and they are a wonderful resource. I'm very glad to be on board with them. So we went to Florida. I did the internet search. I had no experience in mobile concession business, no experience at all. I bought this unit brand new, custom made. We had it made by a company down in, I think it was Sarasota, Florida. Drove down there, picked it up, towed it back. Hell, I'd never even pulled anything that big down the highway before. So I drove to Florida with my pickup truck, and I never even owned a full-size pickup truck before then. I had small ones. So I had to buy a big pickup truck to haul it back. I had to buy that. So, you know, I'm out 40 grand, you know, and I haven't even made the first burger or had the first goat processed or anything. Then I had to come back and all those nice signs I designed and the graphics and all that, and I had to pay somebody to make them. Then I had to buy a generator to run the doggone thing and then I had to buy the propane and get the insurance because you have to be insured. And then you have to pay people to help you, and there's gas, and there's this, that, and the other, and taxes and licensing. And by the time you get into it, you've got some money spent, and you have to be prepared to do that. But it is true that it takes money to make money. It is true that it takes money to make money. But the beautiful thing about agriculture is it's one of the only things, because it can be sustainable and it is renewable. Goats have a wonderful propensity for reproducing. 50 goats becomes 150 rather quickly if you pay attention to their needs. There's nothing else that I know of that's legal that you can do that can reproduce at the rates and bring you the return that goats can on smaller acreage with nominal care and nominal work on your part. I spent half an hour a day, and I had 180 does. And half an hour a day was all the time it took me, because basically I just had to look at them, make sure they were there, the electric fences were on, the guard dogs were in, and my automatic waterers had water in them. If the forage is right, and that's where you got to start, you got to go back to Yes, you're a grass farmer, but like the gentleman said, you're a microbe farmer first. And it's all about getting that balance in your land. Very, very important. If you don't understand that, you really don't understand agriculture. And by the way, I'm going to digress for a moment, but it's important. Some people have argued that there's no culture without agriculture. We've heard that. Yes and no. You have to define culture, you see, because agriculture as we know it today really comes from man aggravating the earth. It's an aggravation. We're ripping it up with plows and discs and farrows and this and that and the other, you see. But most of the time we don't see that. Somehow we think that it's our God-given right to just rip it up and do what we want to do, whether it's chemically or sustainable. We have to think about this, and it's really time to rethink this, because before we got into this so-called modern way of lifestyle, that we're doing now, everyone was into hunter-gatherer societies, and somehow they were able to live. This is like pre-Walmart and 24-hour, convenience stores and Food Lion and Piggly Wiggly and Kroger's and whatever, Dr. Jekyll and Hyde stores, whatever. This is before all of that. And somehow we all managed to get where we are today. And our ancestors before us, go back 5 or 6 generations, didn't have any of this stuff that we think we need right now. We don't need it. And if we are really going to talk about sustainability, then we have to open up the argument. You have to open up the discussion to what is really sustainable. And are we really talking about sustainable and natural, or are we just talking about modifying an old system, replacing it with the new system, and applying the same greed-based? You understand what I'm saying? If we're putting the same greed base right back into what we're doing, we really haven't made any progress. So we're regressing back, but we're doing it with a different generation of chemicals, because it is the nature of man. Knowledge supposedly progresses like in a linear thing. So this is 2011. But in 2050, mark my words, somebody's going to say some of these agricultural principles that we're using now, calling sustainable and biodynamic and organic, they're going to be questioning them, because that is the logical progression of the beast. Knowledge does not stop. There will be something new. There's always a new kid on the block. You have to have your mind open and know that, because the mistake we all make is thinking that the time we're living in is the epitome. It's like, we're at the top of this curve. Maybe not so. So, there's some more pictures of vending. So, who eats goat? We're going to take a look at that. And most people will eat goat. And I'm willing to bet that when you get a chance, most of the people in here are going to sample that goat, and I'm not going to twist your arm. You're going to tell me what you think. And most of you are going to like it. So, this is an informal survey, but most of you in this room will eat goat, and you will like it. This was at the Heritage Harvest Food Festival up at Thomas Jefferson's backyard up there at Monticello. And look at that ethnic crowd. What ethnicity do you think they are? Makes me wonder. I'm always...
Rare white people.
They're, what are they?
Rare.
Well, it's very interesting, because in my early days in the goat world, I was told that all of my customers would be ethnic people. So I look back at this, and I'm wondering, I need someone to define for me what ethnic means. You see, because everyone has an ethnicity. I mean, who here doesn't have an ethnicity? That's what I thought. So if ethnic people eat goat and you all have an ethnicity, guess what? You'll all eat goat. So it's trickery. It's trickery. It's like saying people will only eat fish on Friday. Or, how about this? Only Catholics eat fish.
That was an extension. I went to a goat meat thing several years ago, and that was their big thing. Right? That was going to be like the Muslims or the West Indians.
And they were all lying. They were all lying to you. Well, I don't think they even meant well, and I'm going to tell you why. And I'm going to tell you why, seriously. They didn't even mean well, because their perspective was coming from that they knew more than everyone else. And not only that their understanding of everyone else was so great. But what they were really saying in truth was, I'm not going to eat it, but I think that those other people will. because that's how they are. Well, here they are again. And I guess this lady here is saying that she's, I mean, maybe she's Swedish. I'm just guessing, you know? And maybe this guy's from Romania. I'm not seeing any Mexicans, no Hispanics, no Muslims. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But I'm saying that's the lie. You can't believe it anymore. Look at what your eyes, this is it. We're at Monticello. It's not too many Muslims that's coming there in the first doggone place. So nobody came up to me and said, "Shalom alaikum, can I have a goat burger?" Don't believe the hype. Oh, once more. Wow. So this whole ethnic crowd thing, maybe we need to revisit that. Maybe it's not true. And again, there you go. Virginia State University. Wonderful place. All kinds of people. Oh, more people again. See, lots of people eat goat. So, here's what we do. We are sustainable, all natural and organic. We raise goats the natural way, which means they are always free range. Yes, they have shelter, but my shelter is a 3-sided run-in barn. When you go to build a building for your goats, you never want to make it so tight. The worst thing you can do is to lock them up in stalls. You don't need a whole wooden structure. You need a regular shed-type roof that the water can run off. You want to have it facing south so you get maximum passive solar gain. You want good ventilation. You want to build that building up about 4 feet high. You don't need to come any higher than that with solid sides. I would recommend that you go to your local sawmill or greenwood provider and get you some pine, oak, poplar, whatever they're selling at a reasonable price. You don't have to go to the Lowe's and buy that processed wood and put 1/2-inch slick plywood and stuff all around it. You're wasting your money. There's nothing natural about that. If you're going to be a natural and sustainable farmer, go for natural and sustainable building materials. You see, it's not like you really have a choice of saying, I'm all for organic and sustainable, and this is my mantra, and this is what I love to do, but I go to Lowe's and I get all this treated lumber, and I go to Lowe's or I go to this and I get all of these 1/2-inch sheets of plywood that are been saturated with all these chemicals and processed in these plants where they're, you know, it may not be slave labor, but it ain't much more than that. And all these multinational companies that you hate to support that are behind the chemicals that are in the wood, blah, 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 blah. There's a responsibility to be conscious of where you spend your money. Native and improved forages. Native forages are the first thing you want. That's really what you have to assess it honestly. Goats are not sheep. Goats are not cows. They don't want to live on grass. If you've got a lot of grass, my advice would be to put another species on it that likes grass. Goats like forbs, they like thistle, they like briars, they like shrubs, they like small trees. They will thrive on those things. They can live any place a deer can live because they're first cousin to a deer. Their digestive system, they are a ruminant just like a deer. Where a deer can live, a goat can live. How many people feed the deer? Raise your hand. Not intentionally. I'm speaking intentionally. How many people intentionally feed the deer? You do. Well, that's nice. You may be kind-hearted. You want to bang a big buck or whatever. The other thing is, how many people have ever seen a deer at your veterinarian's office? How many people have ever seen a deer having a difficulty delivering a kid, a baby deer? What do they call them? Fawns. Yeah, they call them fawns, don't they? Okay, no. All right. How many of you have seen a sick deer on the side of the road? Ask yourself why. Who's taking care of the deer? Deer takes care of itself because it's in a natural environment that was created for the deer by the creator of all things, who says, hey, we're going to put you in this environment, and guess what? They have a sustainable relationship unless man comes in and screws it up by encroaching on their environment and making it split up into different. Now they can't get across the highway to get to this feeding plot or that or to the water, and now we have problems running into deer. But it's not the deer's fault, because man, with especially Western men with the colonial mentality they want, and they want to colonize wherever they land. Hey, we're going to just, that's what we do. And we don't care who was here or what you look like, whether you got 4 legs or 2 legs is now ours. And we're going to strip it, put roads in it, and fences and highways and airplanes and whatever, because that's what we do. All of which, by the way, is not sustainable. So get back to that definition of sustainable and organic. You're going to have to really question it, because we can't keep on thinking that even if we replace, I'm digressing a bit, but it's all pertinent, even if we replace all of the cars on the highway with electric cars or hydrogen cars or what have you, the problem is still going to be there. And the problem is we're moving too fast, going too many places, and getting nowhere fast. The bigger problem is our perception of the reality of who we are, where we are in time. This little blue marble in the sky and the universe beyond it. It requires some thinking. We give an organic mineral that is fed free choice to our goats. It's always available in front of them. We support Countryside Organics. I recommend their products. It is a powdered, organic-based mineral supplement with garlic and probiotics and Redmond trace minerals and everything in it that these goats need. It's called Healthy Mineral for Horses and Goats. No, it's not a Furtrell. It's their own proprietary blend made by Countryside Organics, located now in Waynesboro, Virginia. It's their custom blend, and it's excellent. I think it's about $34 for 50 pounds, and you may say, oh, my God. Well, when your babies are born and you don't have to assist them, and if you're raising goats and you're going out there with heat lamps and blankets and you're jugging them, you know what jugs are? The stalls you put the mother and the baby in. If you're doing all of that, you're not raising goats naturally. You remember, goat's a first cousin to a deer. Who jugs the deer? Who goes out there with the blanket for that baby? Who puts the heat lamp on him? Who goes out there with the bottle? You know, who's banding them? Who's castrating them? Who's doing all of these things? The model is broken, and what you've been taught is just like that ethnic stuff. Lies. It's just what it is. Automatic waterers. Right now, my goats, if they're thirsty, they're drinking. They walk up to the automatic water. It's a great thing. Also, I use that as a CREP program. We fenced off the creeks on the farm to keep the goats from going in and putting fecal matter in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, for which they will pay you to keep your goats out of there and cost share for your automatic waterers. This liberates you from having to ever go out there, carry buckets, drag hoses, and worry about your animals getting watered when you're not there. It makes no sense not to do these things if you're in the situation where you can apply that. And most of you can, if you've got some creeks or whatever on the farm. If not, there's still cost share for other reasons and other ways to attach it. You have to talk to those people, those NRCS folks. Okay, our goats experience very little to no illness. And I mean that. I'm not in business to be a nursemaid. I've known lots of people who've raised lots of different kinds of goats, and the stories they tell me are horrendous. I'm like, what? Now, I have experience. I've raised a lot of animals before. I raised sheep before, and my wife and I used to get up 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Every 2 hours, you're going out to check the barn when it's time to kid, because, you know, if it's cold or snowstorm, whatever, they might have this kid and then might not get up, and or more than likely, have a hard time delivering it because it was too big and couldn't pass through the birth canal. Well, I don't have that problem with the goats at all. But you have to be careful what you buy, what you ask for. Natural kidding, no pens, no overcrowding, keep it simple. In Virginia, the rule of thumb is that you can stock your acreage at 5 goats to the acre, 5 mama goats, okay? Doesn't matter how many babies she has, but 5 goats to the acre. That's good, but don't plan for the maximum stocking rate. Give yourself some slack. I mean, wouldn't you rather that goat be able to take care of itself with the least amount of stress? So why not put 3 to the acre? Well, you know, but if I put those extra 2, then that's going to make the difference because that's going to make the money. If it's down to 2 goats to the acre making you the money, you need to do something else. Because that means you've got too small a space to raise them in to make money realistically. You're going to have to be going to the feed store. And by the way, write this down. This is a good reference for you. First, I'm going to ask, it's a rhetorical question, but I have to do it. Which came first, The feed store or the goat? How many think the goat came first? Raise your hand. So then, why do you need the feed store now? Which has been here the longest? The goat or the feed store? The goat wins again, right? And the truth is, every domesticated animal that we raise on our farms, goats, sheep, horses, pigs, chickens, ducks, all came before the feed store. Now, these, and I'm going to put this in quotations, quote, modern, quote, unquote, breeds, and maybe we'll talk about what a breed is later. We'll see how much time we have. Varieties of livestock that we confine on places we call farms, where we agitate the land and confine animals for our benefit. This is what we do. I mean, this is what we do. We have to see it clearly for what it is. Okay. They have all the problems that are inherent in them because they're unnatural. So you're saying, I want to raise an unnatural animal in as natural of a way as I possibly can. And the real truth is that the most natural way to raise that animal is to never fence it, never confine it. If you really want to be natural. Okay. Here's some pictures of my farm and some of our herd. We started with the KIKO goats. How many of you have heard of KIKOs? Okay. Okay. KIKOs come from New Zealand, right? That's the story. I was their national secretary. I was on their board of directors. And the gentleman whose family created KIKO's goats, his name is Garrick Batten. He was a guest at my house. And he looked over my herd. He was quite impressed with what he saw. But he told me this, and I'll say this in my best New Zealand accent. You Yanks are damn crazy. And I was offended. But I don't know why, because he was talking about the other ethnic people, not me. But anyway, that's what he said. But now I got it, what he said, because he says, look, my family, we created these KIKOs, this breed, which, by the way, KIKO means meat in the indigenous language of the people of New Zealand, which are Maori people, which have a Polynesian and African base. Maori in their language means meat. I mean, KIKO means meat in the Maori language. So KIKO was just the generic term for meat. Now, what happened was that the European whaling industry, coming out of England, would stop off in New Zealand, and they would drop off these dairy goats that they bought from England and just turn them loose on the island and come back later, and that was their food supply, because they couldn't carry a bunch of food on those boats. So New Zealand just was like a big pasture, free pasture for them. They dropped these goats off there, and they'd come back year after year, and they could harvest them and have food for their whaling trips. After so many generations, now mind you, New Zealand is an island. There's no natural predators for these goats there. There's no wolves, no coyotes, all that Tasmanian devil stuff not happening in New Zealand, no. These goats just multiplied like crazy. How could they do that? No feed store, no veterinarian, no wormers, no hoof trimming, no injections, no breed association, no planned breeding program. Basically, a very Darwinian, toss them out there, survival of the fittest, and go back and collect them, okay? After so many generations of doing that, they developed to be a very hardy, self-sufficient goat. But was it a meat goat? Now, we have to define what's a meat goat. It was a goat. But every goat's a meat goat if you eat it, right? This is part of the trickery. So what they did was, they had all of these goats there. They became a nuisance on the island. They paid people to round them up and shoot them and slaughter them because they were overstripping the vegetation on the island. It became a problem like rabbits and over in Australia and so forth and so on. But what they first decided to do was they formed a consortium. And the name of that consortium was Goatex LLC. The goat consortium of Goatex rounded up these feral does, nondescript, and they start crossing them with Angora bucks, Angora goats. Who knows what an Angora goat is? Angora goat is a fiber goat. Mohair comes from Angora goats. Angora goats come from, who knows where Angoras come from? Angora goats come from Turkey. That country right there above Iraq and Iran, Mediterranean, Black Sea, the bridge between Europe and Asia. Angora goats come from Turkey, and actually Angora is a corruption of Ankara, which was the capital of Turkey. And I know that because I used to live there. So what they did was they took these Angora goats because they were going to cross them with this wild feral population to make not meat, but mohair. So the very first thing that the New Zealanders were into marketing was not a meat goat. The creation of this goat didn't come from that. It came from these guys wanting to have a mohair market. But what happened was that the bottom fell out of the mohair market. That experiment didn't really work for a number of reasons. One is this thing we call progress, where people moved away from natural fibers to synthetics. Faster, cheaper, what have you, less work. Okay? Again, greed motivated shifts. Very important to understand that. A lot of things happen to us because of greed and the shifts that greed causes. So what they did was they said, okay, guys, this isn't working. We've still got all these goats, but we don't have a market for this mohair. So now we're going to cross them with Anglo-Nubian, Toggenburg, and Saanen dairy bucks. And that is how the KIKO breed was created. That's it. So you got feral goats back crossed onto dairy bucks to make the KIKO does. And in this picture here, those, well, that's what they look pretty much like. They're dairy because they are genetically 2/3 dairy. So they're not the same thickness, but they're totally wonderful, good maternal genes. They make great moms. They work very well, but they're overpriced in the marketplace for a commercial meat goat producer. And I'll say this myself because I spent money buying them initially, when you couldn't buy one for less than $600 or $1,200 or $2,500 when I got into it. I mean, a 30-day-old baby. Okay, so we started with KIKO and Spanish crosses, and in the breeding associations, you do what's called breeding up. You guys familiar with that concept? Breeding up. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, quick lesson for breeding up. I would take a purebred, registered KIKO buck, breed it to a Spanish doe. The offspring would be half KIKO and half Spanish, correct? You follow me? Okay, half KIKO, half Spanish. The buck has the papers. The doe has none. Okay? Now, mind you, I'm breeding for a purebred KIKO because KIKOs cost more than Spanish. And you know why? Because I got a piece of paper that says so. Okay. So now I take this half KIKO, half Spanish doe, breed it back to a KIKO buck. Their subsequent offspring is 3/4 KIKO, 1/4 Spanish. Don't you know that the 3/4 KIKO was worth more than the half? How do you know that? Because I just told you, and I got a piece of paper. That's the truth. Next time I breed that 3/4 doe back to a KIKO buck again, and now I have a 7/8 genetically, 7/8 KIKO, and guess what? It's worth more again. With each subsequent back breeding to a purebred registered KIKO buck, I increase the value of that doe until I get to where I'm having 15ths, 16ths, which are registerable as purebred KIKOs, and now I can sell it to you for $600, even though his mother only cost me $200. But because I took the time to breed up, and I kept the paper trail, I can now take that $200 doe that I started with, who now created me $600 daughters. I've tripled the net worth of what I started from. That's the breeding game. That's a whole other market, but I just want to share that with you because if you go out there to buy goats and somebody tells you it's half this or 3/4 that or 7, hey, sounds great. They have a nice piece of paper to go with it. What are you going to do with that goat? If you're going to be a commercial meat goat producer, you don't need any papers. You need a good goat. And I'm going to tell you what I know for sure. Between that $600 goat with 5 generations of pedigrees and a gold seal and a $200 Spanish or $150 Spanish, they both have babies the same way on the same day. and they both grow the same under the same husbandry conditions, and they both will create and produce the same net worth back to you as a producer. Do the math yourself, and you figure out what it's worth. Don't believe all the hype. There are some reasons to know what you're starting with, though, because if the maternal genetics aren't there, you're going to have a nightmare. And I will tell you, if you're going to go into a commercial meat goat operation, don't spend your money on boars. Boar goats are going to require a lot more worming, a lot more hoof trimming, a lot more feed, a lot more maintenance. They're going to work your behind more than you want to work it. I'm telling you the truth. They come from an arid area of Africa where they were developed, where it's mostly sand. They don't have the rainfall. They get hoof rot. They have a high propensity for worms. They have a terrible reputation for being mothers. Read all the studies, and particularly go to the ones by Dr. Richard Browning from Tennessee State, who tells you that the KIKO and the Spanish maternals are the best. That's why I use them. Now, you can cross them on whatever you want for a terminal sire. Who knows what a terminal sire is? Anybody know? Okay. A terminal sire is what you use on top of a doe to create an animal that's going strictly to the slaughter market. It's terminated. There's no future. You're not going to use it for breeding. You're not trying to pass on those genetics. Doesn't matter how pretty, how cute, what color, it makes no doggone difference. It's a terminal sire. You only use him to make burgers, kebabs, and curry. But you want a good buck who will put the genes into your herd for rapid growth, thickness of muscle, and how this makes a difference for me, and I'll explain this a little bit later, is that if you've got a buck that you breed to 50 does, say you got buck A and buck B. You breed buck A to 50 does, you breed buck B to 50 does. Buck B's 50, 75 children average 3 pounds apiece more than buck A's. You take that 3 pounds times 70, that's 210 extra pounds you have to sell. And if you market it my way, times 38, the buck's worth his money. So it's important to know your genetics. I am using a MYOTONIC buck, and it took me a couple of years to get there to use him because I read all the stuff. They're also called Tennessee stiff-legged, fainting goats, wooden-leg goats, all these other different things they call them. Because I do the research, because I love to research, even though I do it with a pretty open mind, I think. The studies say that if you cross a MYOTONIC buck on any of these other does, regardless of who she is or what she is, he's going to add an additional 6 to 10% of muscle mass to the offspring. For me, that's 6% more burgers, 6% more kebabs, 6% more curry goat. This is my MYOTONIC buck, and we call him Magic Man. He is registered. I have papers on him. And he does produce thick-muscled, hardy kids that grow out well. And we expect that additional 6 to 10% that I just talked to you about. And I have it, because last year was the first time I used him across all of my Spanish and KIKO does. And when I went and had my goats processed, the gentleman who butchers them for me says to me, you know, my brother came in here today, and he wanted to buy a goat. He saw your carcasses hanging up in the chill room, and I want you to know, Mr. Turner, he wanted to buy your goats. But I couldn't sell them to him because I knew they were yours. And that's because when I take mine in, because I raise them, well, I have them cut the tails off, so when the carcasses are hanging, I can always tell my goats, you see. And you could see the difference, you know, in the carcass and the muscling. You could see the difference. So it does make a difference. And these goats are a North American land race. They are indigenous to North America, very hardy, easy to keep, smaller. They don't jump fences. They don't even really faint. There's a long story. They do not faint. They do have myotonic congenital. They do lock up. They can fall over. It's pretty amusing at times, but they're damn easy to catch. This is an example of a nice Spanish doe. I bought 150 does one time from out of state, and out of the 150 does that I bought, she's the only one that's left on my farm. And the reason for that is because she's always stayed in this body condition. She's never had a worming problem. Have we ever wormed that? I don't think we ever wormed her in 4 years at all. And she's just on what you see, natural vegetation there. These girls don't much grain. I do give them some corn in the later part of their of their pregnancy and when their kids are first born, because the forage quality goes up and down during the year. I want that milk to be rich. It's not about beating these does up. You got to treat them right because they're making you money. Yes, sir. No, the La Mancha is a breed that is credited with being developed in Spain, from particularly the La Mancha province of Spain, but that's a dairy goat. This is a Spanish. Now, let me explain this to you. That's a very good question. Spanish is generally used as a generic catch-all phrase for goats that have almost a nondescript origin, but there are pure Spanish, and there is a Spanish Goat Association, of which I'm actually going to join and become a member because I like the Spanish, and my farm is going to be based on Spanish goat genetics and KIKO genetics on the maternal side, and I'll use whatever I want, like I said, on the buck side to get what I need. But no, La Mancha is a dairy breed. This is a meat goat. Now, what I don't like about her is she only has singles instead of twins. But every time she has a single, and she only has bucks. She's never had a doe. A doeling. A buckling is less than a year old, doeling less than a year old. She's never had a doe. She's only given me male offspring. And this year she has one that looks just like her that I'm going to keep as a future breeder in my herd because he's out of her and that black myotonic buck that I just showed you. But phenotypically, which is the physical form that you see, it has the same markings just like the mother. It doesn't look like the father at all, but it inherits his thickness and musculature and that F1 generation vitality that's going to be more worm resistant, quicker growing, and less maintenance. You want a maintenance-free goat. Okay, here's some of our KIKOs. Now, what you're looking at here is a family. The black is the buck. That's the father. He's a myotonic. The one in the middle is the daughter. And if you look closely, you see the tip of her ear is missing. See that one sticking up? And that's the mother. The reason that her ear is missing is because she was born in the middle of a snowstorm. It was so cold out there, she had frostbitten tips. These KIKOs are so tough and hardy that mother had the doe out there. I had round bells. She went out there around side, had a little baby, licked it up, nursed it. I never touched it. It was so cold, lost the tip of the ear. It makes no difference. It's the rest. You don't eat the ears. Still totally good doe. But look at the thickness. And you can see what she inherited is this thickness in through here. That came from him. That depth of body from the withers to the bottom here came from the father. The KIKO is lighter bone, doesn't have that thickness, doesn't carry the top line. Look how straight that one is. There's advantages. Genetics has a lot to do with where you go with it. That cross works very good. So we started with KIKOs as our maternal base because they do have excellent maternal traits, excellent mothers, easy keepers, no kidding problems, and good commercial cross does. Don't spend $600 buying a purebred KIKO from anybody if you're going to be raising meat goats. If you want to play the breeder market and you want to just have them there to look at and you want to wait 5 or 6 months to sell a goat for somebody to come to your farm, go ahead and do it. But here's what we have observed. The goats will thrive best when allowed free range and not crowded. Think of a goat as a first cousin to a deer. Feedlotting animals is not sustainable, will not last over time. Moving animals 10 times a day? Come on, people. Man, it sounds interesting. But who wants to do that? Why would you want to do that? Is it natural? It's not. And think of any wild animal you can think of. They range over an area. That's because they have the freedom to do so. Give your animals freedom to do what they would naturally prefer to do. If you don't have enough space to do it, raise something else. Worms. Let me go back 1 second. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Will your goats force the deer out of the habitat?
Oh, no. No, not at all. The goats don't. Goats and deers will cohabitate, but there are some issues with goats because goats can pass on, with deer can pass on to your goats a meningeal worm, which is a problem. And I actually lost a buck to a meningeal worm that's passed from deer to goats. Now, you'll see them, and they'll be in the same pasture together. They have no fear of each other. But I have livestock guarding dogs, so goats are fine. The deer, not so fine. Deer jumps over the fence, the dogs go, deer leaves.
What kind of dog, by the way, Mike?
I have Akbash dogs. I have 5 Akbash dogs and 2 healers because I'm not running after goats. You have to balance your workload on the farm by having the animals who have the mentality to do the job. You need a herding dog if you're going to have a herd of goats. Because when they get out, unless you're going to run after them, you can do that. Me, I'm going to send the dog and tell the dog, Myrtle, her name is Myrtle, go put the goats up. I can go back in the house, have a cup of coffee. She's going to go out there and get them up and put them back. Works much better for me. So marketing our way allows us to process these kids at 6 to 7 months of age, no more than 7, with the goal being 6 months. We do not have to feed most of the year. 9 months out of the year, my goats get free choice mineral, free choice water, free choice browse and grazing. The other 3 months of the year, I'll have to supplement with round bales of hay and a cracked corn or corn gluten that as I can find it. Yes, ma'am.
How do your goats cycle? I mean, are you breeding out of season, or you just let nature take its course so that you don't have all your goats ready at one time?
I let nature take its course because I am a naturalist, and I don't believe that it is our position to try to improve on nature. I mean, we can try that, but we're taking ourselves too seriously when we begin to think that we're so smart that we can actually control nature. To me, it's wrongful thinking. You see, that's thinking motivated by greed. I want all my babies born at this time of the year because it's going to be easier for me. No. It's not about what's easier for you, as strange as that may seem. It's about what makes sense in the natural cycle of things.
I was just asking so that you can keep meat available year-round and not just have them drop all at one time, because you want to
Right.
process them at 6 months.
When the 6 months comes, and if I've got 70 out there that are ready to go, they go. Those nannies, those does are going to be bred back again at 3 months. Because at 90 days, I'm separating out the bucks anyway, so they're not breeding back to their mothers and sisters, and they go on one side, and they get 3 more months on the farm, and then they are gone. Okay, so I name all the boys Cash and all the girls Flo. It's nothing personal. You just got to keep it straight. So, but they're still gonna kid you around because I leave my buck in there year round. Why do I leave it in there year round? How many of you are married? Not so many. Okay, well maybe this won't make too much sense for you. But anyway, the point being, in the natural world, let's go back to the deer model, first cousin to a goat. What happens with the bucks and the does in the wild? Are they separated? What about the male birds in the air, or the male fish and the female fish in the sea? Are they separated? Is it natural? No.
I have a question.
Yes.
You do all value added, so it wouldn't really, I mean, can you
Exactly.
freeze that meat?
Absolutely, you can freeze it, and that's a very good point. And
Actually use it whenever you need it.
it's a value added.
Not selling fresh carcasses.
Absolutely not. I'm selling a cooked, ready-to-eat product, and I can put it in my freezer, and I can serve it to you. And I do most of my selling in the warm season, when they're festival season, you know, like May, June, July, August, September, October, November. You know, that's enough. You know, you're supposed to rest in the fall anyway. Jeez. And the goats provide great manure for organic market gardenings, and that's the other business that we do. We grow organic herbs and vegetables, and it's wonderfully composted goat manure, which builds the soil, and it's very sustainable, and I don't have to add anything to it. I do a little dolomitic lime. Yes, sir. I go into the barn with and I have a tractor and a rake and a shovel, and I put it in the bucket. No. They make those little like pellets, and they deposit them. So they do a great, wonderful job of But in the barn where they do go to sleep at night.
So they will actually litter the barn.
Absolutely. And you want them to, because you're going to go and collect that. That's another crop. You harvest it and you put it in your garden. Run your tiller over it, some lime, throw some seeds, turn the water on, good to go. And they're not overcrowded. Okay, why meat goats? The commercial meat goat industry in this country is still in its infancy. The market will continue to grow, and demand will continue to be greater than the domestic supply. That goat rancher that's passing around here, I think the gentleman back there has it, the lead article in there says that America needs more good does, correct? That's what it says on the front. We need good does, female mature goats called does. They're importing 1.5 tons of goat meat every month into this country from Australia. 1.5 tons. It's in the article in there. I'm not making these figures up. So that means that we are at a deficit. We cannot keep up with the domestic demand in this country. And here's the kicker. Most of you will say, but I've never been to a store and I've never seen goat meat, right? Who's buying it? You're making the one critical mistake. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Now, you may not see those people, but they're there. And just because you don't think they're there doesn't mean that they aren't there. And they're there in greater numbers than you would care to imagine. And they're eating goat every day. and they can't get enough. But they will be happy to buy it from you. You see, they will be happy to buy it from you. Commercial meat goats are an excellent choice for smaller family farms and an excellent choice for sustainable production systems. Goats have a lower, smaller carbon footprint than just about any other type of livestock I can think of raising on a farm. They increase the value of the land. They will take marginal land that you couldn't raise anything else on, and they will go through and they will clear out that understory up as far as they can reach. That lets in light, that increases the growth of forbs. Native vegetations will start to grow, and after 4 or 5 years of having goats in an area, it will look totally differently than it did when you first put them in there. It improves the value of your land, and with smart management, you can now move the fence and let them do the next one and the next one, and guess what? You didn't have to hire a dozer. You didn't have to go in there and burn up a whole lot of diesel. You didn't have to pollute the air. You just have to be patient. And modern man is not very good at being patient. But to me, modern, I have an acronym for modern, stands for mostly, overly dependent, economically repressed, and then new age people or whatever. Actually, I call it know-it-alls. But anyway, we think we're on top of so much, but we're not. And we're not supposed to be. You see, we're taking ourselves so seriously, like, you know, but when we're all dead, guess what? Earthworm's still going to be here. Cockroaches still going to be here. So, I mean, how important? Okay, goats should be raised naturally on forage-based diets and free-range at all times. Very important observations here. You've got to let animals be. Okay, I'm going to put it to you this way. I could take 50 goats, and I could put 50 stalls in a barn. I now have to build this big, massive structure with the 50 stalls. And then I have to put 50 buckets of water in each one for each mother, and 50 things of mineral, and 50 flakes of hay, and 50 little feed troughs. And I'm carrying this stuff back and forth all day, and I'm hating it. It's cold, it's raining, I'm tired, my back hurts. Why am I doing all this? Because somehow I think that that's good husbandry, and I'm doing these goats a service. And no. Raising the wrong goats. 15 minutes a day, half an hour at the most, is all I ever spend with my goats. And that's just really to keep them friendly. You know? Goats should be provided with adequate protection from the elements. This is key. You do have to provide them with shelter. And there are people who will raise goats out in Texas and New Mexico and other places, and I know several of them. But here's their farm. Their farm is 7,500 acres of scrub, cactus, sage, and nothing hardly to eat. You need 1,500 acres. Because the goats have to walk 10 miles a day to get a nibble and water. Because it's no vegetation. It's really sparse. These goats are wild. They don't put any money in. That's a really low-impact system. But you know what? They're only going to go out there and collect the survivors and sell them for $2 and something a pound, and they're happy. But guess what? They didn't even spend 30 minutes a day. They don't spend any time. When it's roundup time, it's roundup time. And you got these crazy goats jumping all over the place. They've never been touched by human hands. Oh, my God. It is not a pretty sight. You're going to get hurt. They're going to get hurt. They're going to be stressed. You can't ship them too far. There's a downside to that, too. But it's very natural. It truly is. No argument there. They're raised totally naturally, like no input from man. Okay. It's very important that they are protected from the elements. Well ventilated. Very important. Your barn should not be tight. Fresh air is essential. It's totally essential. I build mine 4 feet up from the ground with lumber, planks, what have you. And then the next 4 feet, I found this stuff. It's like a ripstop nylon. It's a 60% wind block. It's actually like a black woven wire. Sometimes you see it like on, baseball fields and places, or similar to like a shade cloth you'd put on a greenhouse. And the ribs in it run vertically. So rain can hit it, but 80% of it gets stopped. But it lets in light. And light and ventilation help your animals stay healthy. There's no odor in the barn. I could have 100 does in there, and it's going to be dry, and it's not going to smell. I never close the front. It can't even be closed. It's deep enough where they can go in it and stay out of the weather. In the wintertime, I will put a partition in there to give those mothers an extra barrier from the cold. So, because they're going to kid when they kid, they can go up in there and snuggle up in that corner. I'll put some straw down. They'll have that baby. and they're out of the wind, they are smart enough to go and get out of the wind. Crowding is to be avoided. What happens when you crowd any species? That's right. It's called stress. And that's what cities do to people. People in the cities are stressed. They're crowded. They can't breathe well because the air is polluted. There's not enough food to go around, so they're competitive. There's not enough jobs to go around, so they're competitive. They really don't like it, but they have to deal with it because they're there. Same thing with the animals. Crowding is to be avoided. Again, the general public will eat meat, and value-added production is the way to go. Now, some of the other things we could do, and I thought about it, and I probably will do it, is like chili. I could make a goat chili. That's wonderful. Grind it all up. Why did I do burgers? Because the ethnic people, raise your hand, like burgers. There you go. She said it. I didn't. But it's the truth. You see? And you have to see truth and know truth when you see it. Americans are burger-eating people. You don't have to go out and reinvent the wheel. Give the people what they want. You know? I could have gone out there and done a little shish kebab. And people wouldn't know, or other stuff. I've lived all around the world. I know how to make a bunch of different kinds of food, but Americans don't know about it. So keep it simple, stupid. Give them a burger. They'll line up. They'll thank you for it. They're ethnic. Value-added production is the way to go. And be creative in your marketing. Retain the ownership of your product. Shun the middleman. Farmers, we're in the most enviable situation. Here's what we're in. We're in a position where everybody eats. Everybody wants your product. But we're going to give it to somebody else to sell for us. Why do we do that? You know? And it's like we don't even retain ownership anymore. It makes no sense. But that's the model that we've been taught. So we've been taught basically to be a subservient to the supermarkets, the major food companies that we detest, you know, Archer, Daniel, Midlands, ADM, another damn monster. That's what it stands for. Okay. And this is our contact information, and then we're going to open up to questions, and I'll do the best I can to answer. And we're at Vanguard Ranch Ltd. And I'll leave that up there so you can write down the email. Feel free to email me. I do consultations. I can come out and do farm visits and show people the things I've learned, and I can tell you the things that I know will make a difference and how you can. And if you raise goats the way I want you to, I'll be happy to buy those babies from you and make them into my kebabs, and I'll pay you higher than the market price. Yes, ma'am. Nope, I've been to that one in Harrisonburg. I used to use that. I think Joel Salatin has taken that over now in partnership with another guy. It used to be Mays Meats. Are you the other guy?
I'm the other guy.
What's your name?
Joe Cloud.
Joe what?
Joe Cloud.
All right, good. I might be talking. Are you guys organically certified?
No.
Okay. Well, that's okay. I understand why. And, you know, it's kind of a pain in the butt. And the one I go to isn't either, so I don't tout my meat as it's all natural or free range. I've done business there when it was Mays. They did a fine job. I'm sure they do too. And I have gone to Harrisonburg. It's about an hour. I go to Fredericksburg. I go to Harrison. I'll gladly go there too. It doesn't matter. Whoever can take me. Yeah. Well, what do you charge to prepare a goat? Kill it and hang it.
$45 kill fee and 57 cents a pound.
57 cents a pound?
Yes.
Okay. So, you know, write those numbers down because it's important to know what your bottom lines are. And you see my article? Have you looked at the numbers that I have in there? I brokered a deal that's a bit better than that, but I've used this guy for 7 years, and he happens to be an ethnic person, actually. A real ethnic person. I go to Fredericksburg. I use a place called New Talk Beer. The gentleman is a Pakistani Muslim, and I kid you not, they do it the old-fashioned way. All of my goats are halal slaughtered, which means that they have a ritual slaughter and their throats are cut while they're facing east, and the prayer is said. It's done with reverence. It's done with care. There's no kicking him in the butt. There's no shooting him in the back of the head. Actually, there is a prayer, and it's done very respectably, and all of their work is done by hand, and I like that. So when I get my product, there's no gristle. And this curry that you'll have a chance to sample, and please feel free, there's no gristle, there's no bone, there's no cartilage, none of that. We do a premium product. What he charges me and what he charges you, well, because we have an ethnic hookup. Yeah, I'm fluent in that. I have worked a relationship with him. He does a lot of my goats, and if I had 100 a month, he would still do them for me. But basically, we're looking at $35 a head for hanging and killing it, okay? And then, you know, if you want it to hang for 2 or 3 days, you broker that out with him. And then he's charging me about 35 cents a pound, which beats his 57. But his labor costs are going to be different because it's a family business, and he's got his brother-in-law and, you know, his uncle and his cousin or whatever. But you have to develop relationships with people in business to make this work. Yes, ma'am.
Do you breed your young does back to the same buck?
I
know you said you took the males out, the young males out.
No. So the question you're asking me is would I breed a doe back to her father, basically,
Exactly.
or her brother? Not intentionally, but I'll tell you this. There's nothing wrong with that practice if you're going to the slaughter market.
Right.
You see, there really isn't. And there's no need for you to have 10 different bucks on your farm.
Right.
Because if it's going to be a terminal market, you're not holding her back for genetic purposes.
Right.
But each successive generation of line breeding that closely, inbreeding as it is when you get that close, is going to reduce the size of your animal. So I choose to outcross to a different. So I would keep at least 2 bucks and like a doe herd A and doe herd B. Doe herd A would get bred to 1 buck, doe herd B would get bred to another. The daughters from B could be bred to A, so forth and so on, and that can go on in ad infinitum, and it works just fine.
Do you ever sell goats?
I have sold goats, and I will sell some again, but right now, you know, if you see my model, you'd have to pay me what I could get for that animal as a burger or kebab or to make it worth my while. So here's right, exactly. So here's really the question is, why should I sell it for less than what I know it's worth to me? You see what I'm saying? So I'd rather keep 50 than sell 10. I mean, I could sell the 10, and I have, and I would make exceptions because, for example, I could have like 25 bucks born at a time. Well, I don't need 25 bucks. So in that case, I could cut out 1 or 2 bucks that I know would make a decent breeding buck and sell it as a breeding price, and I'm not adverse to doing that. But I'm not going to sell it for 600 bucks. I would be much more reasonable. So to answer your question, yes, does I would keep because they're more valuable to me because that's my future. Bucks I would consider selling. Yes, ma'am.
I was just curious. Your bio says that you used to raise sheep and ostriches.
Yes, see.
What
Mhm.
did you move to goats?
My farm, I was an agricultural science and engineering student. Used to live in California. Was in the Future Farmers of America. Studied a number of things. 1967, I was on the California State Championship entomology team. Entomology is the study of insects. California is a huge agricultural state. I probably would have been an entomologist if I would have stayed there. And I'd probably be dead from all the chemicals that I inhaled. I raised sheep on my farm because when I was in high school in California, I raised sheep. So I had experience raising sheep, and I raised Shropshire sheep in high school. You hardly ever see that breeding around anymore. So when we bought this farm and we started from scratch, we decided we'd go sheep because they're easy to handle and blah, 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 and I knew the market was good. Yes, but sheep need pasture, and they need a lot more work than goats. I had 65 head of registered horn Dorsets, and each one of those cost us, what, $300-400 bucks a deer? All this, I still got a drawer full of all those damn papers. And no more sheep, though, because we were losing money because we didn't have adequate pasture. So we made the mistake that was motivated by greed, which is why I caution everyone. We made the mistake of getting more sheep than our land could sustain based on what we knew was the market price that we could get for those hothouse lambs, which was good. But they totally stripped our land because I cleared raw land, and it takes you 3 to 5 years to go from forest to pasture, and I tried to do it in 2. It was slick as this. And I was having to feed, round bales in the springtime, which meant that my cost factor was out the wazoo, and it was stupid. So why I went to goats is because goats are much more sustainable, and they let the land had a chance to grow back after I got the sheep, and the goats never strip it down. It's never been bare. And guess what? They're a whole lot more productive and easier than the sheep. They're like 10 times smarter than sheep. Now, I did raise registered horn Dorsets. I raised Caracool. And I raised Romanoff and a few crosses. Good sheep, they're nice. More work than goats.
Just because the land...
No, you got to shear them. And they're not as smart, and they're more intense on the land. They require you to manage the land in a different way that requires you to, unless you've got a lot, if you've got premium pasture and you got a lot of good grass, go the sheep, but do hair sheep. What do you want to be shearing? Hair sheep's the way to go. If I was to do sheep, I would only do sheep if I had adequate pasture. I mean really good pasture, okay? And I would only do hair sheep here. And I know there's heritage breeders and all that type of stuff. That's all good. But it depends on what your goal is. If you want to play the breeder market, then you play the breeder market. But understand that's a totally different paradigm than going commercial meat or lambs or anything like that. But, yeah, sheep can work fine. But who's going to shear them for you? You going to shear them? Hair sheep. Katahdins, St. Croix, Barbados, Katahdin. It's a composite breed. It'll work. But I would still cross it with a St. Croix. That's to be my preference. We trim hoofs occasionally, but you want to breed. Who trims the deers? You know, you ever ride horses that were not shod? Anybody? You know, there's certain breeds of horses that are known for the toughness of their hooves, and you don't have to shoe them. Now that makes more sense to me. But you know, if I was a farrier, I'd probably want you to bring me the other kind. But why do you want to do the work? So occasionally, yes, I do have to trim a hoof if I see it's overgrown or if I think they might get a little foot fungus or something. Yeah, I'm going to catch that goat and I'm going to trim the hoofs because you don't want them overrun and walking off funny. They can't get around and do their job, particularly on my bucks. The does, it's important, but you know what? It's more important for that buck to catch that doe. So, yes, I do trim hooves as needed. And you also will have to worm occasionally, regardless of what anyone is going to tell you, because if you're raising animals in confinement, there are things you can do. And here's some of the things I recommend. Sericea lespedeza is a wonderful plant for keeping your worm load down in your goats. Sericea lespedeza. Write that down. Very important. Yes, it's spelled Sericea Lezepeda. Google it. It'll come up if I spelled it wrong. But it's a little difficult to establish, but once you establish it, it's a perennial. It'll come back year after year. It has a high concentration of tannic acid in it, and that is what keeps the worm load down in your goats. The other thing? Yes. And in some states you can't plant it because it's considered a noxious weed. But it's a wonderful plant, and it grows in the poorer the soil, the better it will grow. It'll establish a ditch banks. You don't have to fertilize it. You don't have to water it. You don't have to lime. You put the seeds out, and they come back. And I've grown it as tall as I am, you know, and it's wonderful. The goats will eat that, and it will definitely keep the worm loads down. The other thing is forage chicory, and there's lots of different kind of chicory plants, but any of those plants in that chicory family will help to keep the worm load down in your goats. There's a particular variety of chicory called Puna, P-U-N-A, forage chicory, originated in New Zealand. Now, anecdotally, they was said that these KIKO goats have a genetic predisposition to having a higher tolerance for worms. I think part of that is that they were from New Zealand and they ate a lot of chicory initially, and that helped with that process. The other thing was, hey, they were never crowded there. All of that comes into play as well, you see. So choose your forage as well. You look for perennials, look for forbs. Don't look so much for grasses. You know, I mean, there's some things like I use cereal rye. I've used dwarf pearl millet. I've used the forage chicory, Puna variety, Sericea lespedeza. I like the lespedeza a lot. It does a good job. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Fencing. I think there's only one way to go. Oh, no. If you don't use any fencing, your goats are gone. Make no mistake about it. Fencing is critical. High tensile electric. High tensile electric. It's about the third of the cost of putting up woven wire. Your goats will never get their head stuck in it.
You do it in the woods? You run it like tree to tree, or do you do woods?
You can run it tree to tree, but you as long as you can get around it and maintain it. You know, I actually went through and opened up an area 16 feet long so I can drive my tractor and check my fence line and, you know, and run a bush hog and keep it down so I can keep the... Yeah, I cleared it because I need to be able to go around it and make sure I can maintain my fence. 5 strands or 6 strands of high tensile electric with a very good low impedance charger. I recommend Gallagher or Zabera. I use a Zabera Z100, I think, on one of them. It's like, and it's a direct plug-in, but I also use solar. And that thing is like, puts out like 11 joules. It'll rock your world if you grab it. But, you know, I don't want those goats getting out. You got to teach them. Teach them when they're young, and they never forget it. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to tell you, we've got a fencing school coming up, probably one of the best fencing schools in the southeastern United States. And we've got 4 locations in Virginia. If you'd like more information, I'd be happy to give it to you. But it's much better to go to one of these schools than build a crafty fence, because a crafty fence can cost you a lot of money.
I would highly recommend that as a novice fence builder. When I started, you know, when I used to have like 2 good hands and you will learn. And trust me, if you don't go to the school, learn how to do it. Learn what an H corner is. Learn what it is to build that. You've got to put good corners in, and don't go 300 or 400 feet. Think you're going to save money and don't put a wooden post. You got to follow the lay of the land. You got to do it right. You got to brace it right, and you got to put the right kind of tension on it, and you got to know what jumpers are, and you got to know what all that stuff is, or else you're only fooling yourself. Farming requires a lot of thinking or a lot of reworking. You take your choice. You're going to think about it, or you're going to do it over. Yes, sir.
So what would you describe your general landscape as?
Rolling hills, mixed hardwoods. I've got majority of it is in native vegetation and forested. I'm probably going to open up. I've got 50 acres that I devote to the goats, and over those 50 acres, I will never exceed a stocking density of 5 goats to the acre, which gives me a potential for like 250 does. I'm cutting it in half. I'm saying 125.
And
Because
running in the woods.
they run in the woods and in. I have it both ways. Right now, they're not in the woods because they're up closer to the house because, you know, hunting season came. I like everything close. And then I can let them. It's just certain things you got to do, you know. And the further they are from me to be able to see them easily means I've got to go look and do walking or riding. And I'd rather look out the window and be able to see them. It just makes it easier for me. It's kind of a comfort level thing for me.
I mean, I'm trying to get a sense. It's better to have more wooded area
For goats, yeah, definitely more browse. You want more browse than open pasture. I mean,
don't browse it down and kill it. It'll grow.
not if it's
fast.
primarily grass.
Yeah.
You see, that's where your stocking rate comes into play. You know, there's a couple of good blends out there. There's this same company called Countryside Organics. I just talked to Kevin about a seed blend there, because I was going to buy seed from this company called Barenbrug, and they do a lot of forages, and they make one called Browse Master for goats. It's basically a collection of forbs with some alfalfa thrown in it. I'm not really super big on alfalfa. Its nutrient requirements are higher than what I want to be bothered with maintaining. It's not a natural plant in this environment, so I'm more for the natural side with the native vegetation. Let it come back. It'll tell you what grows there, and that's what you need to stay with. But this blend he's putting together has a high percentage of forbs in it, good mix, and I know it'll do good for the goats. So I'm thinking I'm probably going to buy some from him. And I just met another gentleman here who also from my county, because I support local and sustainable. Both of these guys I can get to within an hour or less, and I can get seed from them. So that's where I'm going to shop, because that's sustainable. And I'm going to plant some of this cereal rye. You can plant that this time of year, and it'll come up and make a great stand. I've got some growing now. I'm going to add to that. I'm real impressed with how that's looking. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. It's a cereal rye. It's, you know, it may persist for 1 or 2 seasons, but, you know, it's something that it's not rye grass. This is a cereal rye. This stuff will grow like this. It's not a grass. Yeah, cereal head. It makes actual cereal grains.
I was more interested in like the forage in the wooded areas.
The forage in the wooded areas is whatever God put there before I got here.
And it seems like, but it's usually slow growing. And
Okay.
It seems like they cut it down
Well,
pretty quickly and it wouldn't come back fast enough.
They'll move around. They're going to move around. If
Just have to have enough area.
if you've got 20 goats in the size of this room and they strip everything up as high as they can reach, they're going to move on to the next area and do the same thing again. By the time they get back, nature always wants to survive. It is the nature of the plant to regenerate itself, and it will continue to regrow. So,
You don't have a problem with it.
no, not at all. Yes, sir.
Just get that balance.
It's all about balance.
You do any vaccines for this one?
Nope.
And when you're worming, when you said you very little worming, are you just looking at the fecal and grabbing one out, or are you doing the whole?
I've done fecal floats before, and I went and learned this Famacha method. You know, that's the new kid on the block in the natural, where you look at their eyelids and the color of their tongue and see if you see anemia. Of course, if you can really see it, they've already got it. It's kind of like the bottleneck. It's kind of like after the fact. If you see it, they've already got a bad worm load. If you got a goat walking around a bottleneck, you better worm it. It's going to die. So you got a choice to make at that point. Bottleneck is when you see that animal walking around and it's got a big pouch hanging up under here. That's all filled with blood and lymphatic fluids because that animal has so many worms in its that the fluids are collecting there and his heart's not able to circulate the fluids in his body efficiently, and it's making a pouch and it's hanging. It's called bottleneck because it looks like a big pouch hanging on. That goat is so severely infested, you better do something that day. You need not to waste time. And then you're going to have to use commercial wormers because the natural and the organic methods are not going to be strong enough and work fast enough in that case and under those circumstances to help you save that animal's life. And it's now he's in your care, and as a caretaker, you still have an obligation to that animal not to let it suffer any longer. You're going to have to learn that because that's the power of observation, and that's what we need more of. You got to go slow enough to see what's going on around you. So, yeah. You got to, there's certain things because you're doing the unnatural thing of keeping them. If I didn't have a fence, my goats would go someplace else now because the ones that have been raised there for years, they'd come back home because that barn is their home, just like my home is my home. I don't need fences for them. They'll come back. They're used to being there. Now, my neighbors might not like it because they've gone across the road or whatever, and but they'll come back around dark. They'll come back around dark because it's time to go to bed. And they'll come back. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I would do the daily visual, and I've done it long enough where I see an animal that starts to lose weight or the side's getting sunken in, or, they're all running and you got 2 or 3 that's lagging behind and walking. They're giving you clues that they're not feeling well. And then you need to call those up and isolate them and say, you know what? We're going to have to worm these. We're going to have to isolate these. And not only do I want to worm them, I want to keep them over here for a couple of days so that those worms that I have treated them for have a chance to pass through and not spread around every place else, you see. But you want to minimize that, you see. So the idea is, of course, but trust me, if you have a ruminant animals, you're going to have worms. You're going to have things like coccidia. It's in the soil. You're going to have it. You got to deal with it. Most healthy animals will be able to deal with a certain level because it's always there. It's just latent. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have rotational grazing, or do you have separate pastures or areas?
I do. And I find that it's necessary depending on your stocking rate. If you've got 50 acres and you've got 10 goats on it, you're probably going to have to worry about it. You see, because you're not stocking them at such a high level. If you've got 5 acres and 50 goats, you're going to have to, you better rotate. Well, the worm cycle, you're talking 28, 30 days, egg, larvae, pupal, and adult. The life cycle of that worm or whatever parasite, we're talking about worms. And 30 days is a good cycle. So I would say you'd have like paddock A, B, C, and D. For the forage to grow back? Depends on the forage type. It depends on the type of forage stand you have. It would depend on the forage that's there, because if my pasture is like native forbs, it's going to grow at one rate. If my package is like gamma grass or alfalfa or clover, it's going to grow at a different rate. So it all depends on the forage, their soil fertility, the rainfall, all of that stuff. Those are all variables, and you got to wing it. Yeah, in the wintertime, I'm supplementing with round bales of hay, but my plan is to be totally sustainable, so that means I'm moving towards winter brassicas for forage, which means your winter turnips, your kales, capetti kale, those type of things that will actually grow through the snow, because I do not want to be dependent on round bales. Oh, they'll eat them and do just fine. I've grown them before and they do well, but I did it when I had less goats. Now that I'll have to plant more. But yes, it's entirely possible to have totally forage-based year-round. So come on up and take a sample of the goat, y'all.